Dr. Andrew here, pediatric chiropractor at Thrive Chiropractic. And parents, I want to take a minute and talk about developmental delays. When you first hear that, you probably think of a lot of different stuff. For you, maybe it's walking that you think of, or maybe delayed speech, delayed early things, delayed late things. Developmental delays can show up in a lot of different ways. But let's think about what actually is going on and how we can address the root cause instead of trying to band-aid and cover up some of the superficial issues. Before we get into that though, I've got to be honest, I get pretty frustrated about how early kid life is handled, and specifically this example, because what I think we should be more proactive and more on top of, we end up waiting on traditionally, and what we should kind of be more patient and let their body work through is what we intervene with and then end up damaging them in the long run. And what I mean is the difference between immune-related challenges and neuro ones early on. Because the immune ones, maybe it's ENT drainage or kicking the sick, trying to fight off a cold, all too often kids are given antibiotics at an early age. And what that does is it wrecks their gut, wrecks their immune system, doesn't allow them to develop the ability to fight off stuff on their own, right? Their immune system is worse off because we're helping it externally. And more often than not, when there's not a crisis, emergency sort of immune situation, we can be more patient. We can support health, support healing, let their body work through that if we're just being patient. So those we're super aggressive. We don't have any patience with. We intervene medically way too much. But the stuff that really should get addressed right away, more than neurodevelopmental things, those we're like, they'll grow out of it, wait and see, it's not that bad at this point, come back in 2 months, come back in 6 months, and maybe if it gets worse, then we'll do something then. Stuff like colic and fussiness, right? You just hope your baby grows out of it. Or maybe they have a head rotation preference torticollis that's leading to a flattening in the back of the head, plagiocephaly. You're like, it's definitely showing up there at 2 months or at 4 months, but let's wait till it's bad enough to need a helmet. Why are we waiting on those things when helping out earlier on makes such a better difference? So that's a whole other side tale, but we need to be more proactive about these things. The key to it all is understanding that whether it's a speech or a movement one or a immune system, no matter what the superficial side of it is, really the underlying thing that we need to be focused on is that neurological system. Our ANS, our autonomic nervous system, is what's running everything internally. It's running all of our different developmental things. And so when they have a motor delay, maybe their head is tight and tense, or they're not moving as they should with crawling and walking, when we're thinking of the different PT interventions or different stretches you can do at home, those can be good. They're focused on the muscle side of it. But until you address the reason why those muscles are tight or why their head won't turn, you're not going to actually address the root issue. So that's where the nervous system has to be at the forefront of it. Rather than just focusing on the tight muscles or the area that's needs stretched out, we've got to ask that why question and say, what can we do to actually correct this neuromotor control? And that always comes down to the nervous system. The number one area that we see neurodevelopment affected and delayed is this upper neck area, because that's where our brainstem lives, and that's where our cerebellum lives, and so many of the key functions for kids early on. When this is affected, when this is impacted negatively, it's going to affect a bunch of different aspects of development. And how might that happen? Well, the number one most missing way that we see providers not noticing that that's happening is the birth process. When we are born, have a whole bunch of extra pulling and turning and twisting at that head and neck all too frequently, that is going to impact this neurological function. It's going to impact that biomechanical movement, and then that's going to lead to all these other neurodevelopmental challenges like the motor issues, like the GI stuff, and then ultimately when that kid gets older, that starts showing up as more advanced neurological things like communication or emotional regulation or the ability to focus and not have a whole bunch of sensory overstimulation. So let's think about this differently. Let's think about developmental delays differently. Let's get to that underlying root issue, which is always going to be the nervous system. It's not to say all the PT or muscle or superficial focus therapies are pointless or they're not good, but they're never going to really get to the bottom of it until we address the neurological function. So that's the question we want to answer, right? And that's what we get to do with technology is say, hey, is there some of that stress, right? This example in these scans, you see that top of the neck is a mess. Whole bunch of color, whole bunch of stress in that upper neck, which in this case was affecting a kid's ability to turn their head, ability to nurse efficiently, ability to be just content and chill and a happy, sleeping, happy baby. So let's start by asking these sort of questions so we don't miss the real issues at play.